众卿家，此图可是我方略。陛下，制路乃南下阴瓯，一速取之。善。粮草辎重可曾备妥？回禀陛下，已抽集3月之用。The Silk Road brings us prosperity. Indeed. What treasures do you bring? Silks and spices from the east. We have Roman glass to trade.
These silks are exquisite. What is your offer?
50 gold coins and this map of trade routes, and safe passage through our lands.
A fair proposal. We have an agreement.
These calculations are remarkable. They align with the celestial movements. This map shows a vast new world. It will change our understanding. We must share this knowledge. These new maps show routes beyond the known lands. Indeed, knowledge flows like the trade winds, and these books will guide us. This spice route promises great wealth. Let us secure the eastern pass. Wise plan. This map shows the path to the eastern kingdoms. Indeed, our Arabic texts confirm it. The globe shows the distances are vast. Trade will bridge these worlds and spread knowledge.
Long before airplanes, before ships crossed oceans with ease, before anyone had drawn a complete map of the world, humanity lived in scattered pockets of brilliance, each one cut off from the others by mountains, deserts, and oceans no one had learned to cross. In China, the Han Dynasty ruled a sophisticated civilization with silk weavers, papermakers, and scholars, but it knew almost nothing about the lands beyond its western borders. In Persia, the Parthian Empire controlled vast territories rich with culture and trade, yet its knowledge of China was little more than rumor, carried by travelers who had never gone there themselves. In India, kingdoms flourished with extraordinary religious and philosophical traditions, producing ideas that would eventually shape billions of lives. And in the Mediterranean, Rome was building an empire that would one day stretch across 3 continents, utterly unaware that somewhere far to the east, an equally sophisticated civilization existed. These worlds spun in isolation, each magnificent, each limited by the simple fact that no reliable path connected them. Mountains as tall as the sky separated China from Central Asia. Deserts wide enough to swallow armies blocked easy passage.
众卿家，此图可是我方略。陛下，制路乃南下阴瓯，一速取之。善。粮草辎重可曾备妥？回禀陛下，已抽集3月之用。
understood how much these separate civilizations needed each other. But all of that was about to change, because one emperor was about to send one man into the unknown. One journey would unite them. In 138 BC, Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty faced a serious problem. Fierce nomadic warriors called the Xiongnu controlled the northern frontier, raiding Chinese territory and threatening trade routes the empire desperately needed. Emperor Wu had heard rumors of distant kingdoms far to the west who might become allies against this common enemy. He needed someone brave enough and clever enough to find them. He chose a court official named Zhang Qian, a man of intelligence and courage, and sent him westward with a small group of companions on a mission that seemed almost impossibly dangerous. Zhang Qian set out not knowing what lay beyond the mountains and deserts that bordered his homeland. Almost immediately, disaster struck. The Xiongnu captured him, holding him prisoner for over 10 years. Most men would have given up hope entirely. Zhang Qian did not. He eventually escaped his captors and continued his mission westward, traveling through unfamiliar territories, encountering peoples and cultures no Chinese official had ever documented before. He reached the Central Asian kingdoms of Bactria and Sogdiana, gathering information about distant lands, exotic goods, and unfamiliar peoples that would astonish the imperial court back home. After 13 years away, Zhang Qian finally returned to China in 26 BC. He had not found the military allies Emperor Wu originally sought, but what he brought back instead was something far more valuable. His discoveries would change history forever. Zhang Qian's reports fascinated Emperor Wu and his advisors. He described kingdoms with skilled horsemen, fertile valleys, and bustling markets filled with goods unlike anything available in China. He spoke of a region called Bactria, where merchants traded goods originating from places even farther west, hinting at trade networks stretching toward Persia and beyond. Most importantly, he revealed that these distant lands desperately wanted Chinese silk, a fabric so smooth, so beautiful, that nothing produced elsewhere could compare to it. Emperor Wu recognized an extraordinary opportunity. If these Western kingdoms valued silk so highly, China could establish profitable trade relationships while also gathering valuable political and military intelligence about potential allies against the Xiongnu. Chinese officials began organizing official caravans, sending silk, lacquerware, and other valuable goods westward through Central Asia. These early expeditions faced enormous challenges, navigating unfamiliar terrain, negotiating with unfamiliar peoples, and surviving harsh environmental conditions that tested every traveler's endurance. Yet the potential profits were extraordinary. Merchants along the route quickly recognized opportunities for themselves, establishing their own smaller trading networks that connected with the official Chinese expeditions. Word spread quickly through Central Asia and beyond about valuable goods moving along this new route. Within decades, established pathways emerged, connecting oasis to oasis, kingdom to kingdom, stretching ever further westward. A genuine trade route was forming, growing more sophisticated with each passing year. The greatest treasures of the East were beginning to move west. Among all the dangers facing Silk Road travelers, none tested human endurance quite like the Taklamakan Desert, a vast, brutal wasteland stretching across the heart of Central Asia. Its very name, in local languages, roughly translates to something like place of no return, a warning that ancient travelers took seriously for good reason. Temperatures during summer months soared to unbearable extremes, while winter brought freezing cold that could kill unprepared travelers within hours. Sandstorms appeared without warning, sometimes burying entire caravans beneath shifting dunes that erased any trace of the path forward. Water sources were scarce and unreliable, forcing caravans to calculate every single drop with desperate precision, knowing that miscalculation meant certain death. Many travelers who attempted shortcuts through the desert's interior simply vanished, their remains occasionally discovered by later expeditions, serving as grim warnings about the desert's unforgiving nature. Experienced caravan leaders developed careful strategies for survival, traveling primarily during cooler nighttime hours, relying on hardy Bactrian camels capable of storing enormous reserves of water and surviving harsh conditions that would kill ordinary pack animals. Local guides familiar with hidden water sources and safer pathways became invaluable, their knowledge worth more than gold to desperate merchants seeking passage. Despite every danger, caravans continued attempting the crossing, driven by extraordinary potential profits waiting on the other side. After days of relentless heat, exhaustion, and fear, exhausted travelers would scan the horizon desperately for any sign of relief. And then, almost miraculously, an oasis would appear. These desert oases transformed into some of the wealthiest, most cosmopolitan cities in the ancient world, their prosperity emerging directly from their strategic positions along Silk Road trade routes. Kashgar, situated at a crucial crossroads where routes from China, India, and Central Asia converged, became an essential stopping point for merchants regardless of their ultimate destination. Samarkand grew into a magnificent city, renowned throughout the ancient world for its wealth, its beautiful architecture, and its position controlling vital trade routes connecting Persia, India, and China. Bukhara similarly flourished, its markets filled with goods from distant civilizations, its streets crowded
The Silk
with
Road
merchants
brings us
speaking
prosperity.
dozens of different
Indeed.
languages.
What treasures do you bring?
These cities
Silks and
developed
spices from the
sophisticated
east.
urban
We have
infrastructure
Roman glass to
support the
trade.
constant flow of travelers and goods, including caravanserais, specialized inns providing shelter, food, and security for merchants and their animals after exhausting desert crossings. Local rulers recognized the enormous economic value these trade routes provided, often competing fiercely to attract merchant caravans through favorable taxation policies, improved security, and impressive infrastructure investments. Wealth flowing through these cities funded extraordinary architectural achievements, including elaborate mosques, palaces, and marketplaces that attracted admiration from travelers throughout the ancient and medieval world. Religious diversity flourished alongside commercial prosperity, with Buddhist temples, Zoroastrian fire temples, and eventually mosques coexisting within cosmopolitan urban environments, shaped by constant cultural exchange. These cities of gold demonstrated how strategic geography could transform desert settlements into centers of civilization. But merchants carried far more than silk through these remarkable crossroads. Silk itself possessed an almost magical quality that captivated everyone who encountered it for the first time. Its production process remained a closely guarded secret within China for centuries, with severe penalties imposed on anyone caught attempting to smuggle silkworms or revealing manufacturing techniques to foreign powers. The fabric's extraordinary smoothness, its lustrous shine, and its remarkable durability made it unlike anything available elsewhere in the ancient world. Wealthy individuals throughout Central Asia, Persia, and eventually the Mediterranean world became willing to pay extraordinary prices for even small quantities of genuine Chinese silk. Economic historians estimate that silk sometimes traded for its weight in gold by the time it reached its final destinations, reflecting both its rarity and the enormous transportation costs involved in moving goods across such vast distances. This extraordinary value transformed silk production and trade into a cornerstone of Chinese imperial economic policy, with government officials carefully regulating production and export to maximize both profit and strategic advantage. Beyond its economic value, silk became a powerful status symbol throughout societies that encountered it, worn by royalty, religious leaders, and wealthy merchants seeking to demonstrate their elevated social position. Demand for silk drove merchants to undertake increasingly ambitious journeys, expanding trade networks ever further westward in pursuit of profitable markets willing to pay premium prices. The fabric that gave the entire trade route its name had become something far more significant than mere clothing material. It had become a symbol of luxury, sophistication, and connection between distant worlds. The Romans, in particular, would become absolutely obsessed. When Chinese silk eventually reached Roman markets, traveling through countless intermediary traders across thousands of miles, it created an immediate sensation among wealthy Roman citizens desperate to acquire this exotic, almost magical fabric. Roman writers described silk with a mixture of admiration and moral concern, noting its extraordinary beauty while simultaneously criticizing what they perceived as excessive luxury and moral decadence associated with foreign imports. Despite these moral objections, demand for silk grew so dramatically that Roman currency began flowing eastward in concerning quantities, creating economic anxiety among officials worried about the empire's gold and silver reserves being depleted to satisfy fashionable consumption habits. Roman knowledge about the actual source of silk remained remarkably vague for centuries, with most Romans believing silk grew on trees somewhere in mysterious eastern lands, having no accurate understanding of silkworm cultivation or Chinese manufacturing processes. This profound geographic and cultural ignorance worked in both directions, as Chinese officials similarly possessed only vague, often inaccurate knowledge about Rome and Mediterranean civilization. Yet, despite this mutual ignorance about each other's actual societies, the economic relationship between these distant civilizations grew increasingly significant. Roman merchants and intermediary traders developed extensive networks reaching deep into Central Asia, seeking direct access to valuable Eastern goods rather than relying entirely on multiple layers of intermediary traders who each demanded their own profit margins. This growing commercial relationship between East and West represented something genuinely unprecedented in human history. Ideas, alongside merchandise, were now traveling vast distances neither civilization had previously imagined possible. As trade routes connecting East and West grew increasingly established, something equally significant began traveling alongside silk, spices, and other physical goods, religious beliefs and philosophical traditions that would eventually transform the spiritual landscape across multiple continents. Buddhism, originating in India, spread northward and eastward along Silk Road trade routes, carried by missionary monks who traveled alongside merchant caravans, teaching Buddhist philosophy and practices to peoples throughout Central Asia. Buddhist monasteries gradually appeared throughout the oasis cities, becoming important centers for religious study, manuscript preservation, and cultural exchange that attracted scholars and pilgrims from across the region. By the 1st century AD, Buddhism had successfully spread into China itself, eventually becoming one of the most significant religious traditions throughout East Asia, fundamentally shaping Chinese culture, art, and philosophy for centuries afterward. Christianity similarly spread eastward along these same routes, now with various Christian communities, including Nestorian Christians, establishing congregations throughout Central Asia and eventually reaching China itself by the 7th century. Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion, spread throughout Central Asian territories alongside Persian merchants and cultural influence. This remarkable religious diffusion demonstrated something profound about human civilization. Ideas and beliefs could travel even farther than military conquest, embedding themselves permanently within distant cultures through patient, peaceful transmission across generations of traders, monks, and pilgrims. Religious diversity flourished within Silk Road cities, creating unprecedented opportunities for theological dialogue, philosophical exchange, and mutual influence between traditions that might otherwise have remained completely isolated from each other. Knowledge itself was becoming the most valuable cargo of all. Beyond religious philosophy, the Silk Road facilitated extraordinary exchanges of scientific knowledge, mathematical concepts, and technological innovations that profoundly influenced civilizations throughout Eurasia. Papermaking techniques, originally developed in China, gradually spread westward along trade routes, eventually reaching the Islamic world
These
and later
silks are
Europe,
exquisite. What is your
revolutionizing
offer?
how
50 gold
information
coins
could
and
be
this map of
recorded,
trade routes,
preserved,
and safe passage through our
disseminated
lands.
throughout
A
distant
fair proposal.
societies.
We have an agreement.
Mathematical concepts, including the decimal system and algebraic principles developed in India, spread westward through Persian and Islamic scholars, who significantly expanded upon these foundational ideas, eventually transmitting this knowledge into European mathematical traditions. Astronomical knowledge and observational techniques traveled in multiple directions simultaneously, with Chinese, Indian, Persian, and later Islamic astronomers exchanging ideas, techniques, and observations that gradually refined humanity's understanding of celestial mechanics. Medical knowledge similarly traveled along these routes, with different traditions sharing herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and theoretical frameworks for understanding human health and disease. Islamic scholars, particularly during the medieval period, played a crucial role preserving and significantly expanding upon ancient Greek, Roman, Indian, and Chinese scientific knowledge, creating sophisticated centers of learning throughout cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and eventually Cordoba that attracted scholars from throughout the known world. This unprecedented exchange of scientific and technological knowledge across such vast geographic and cultural distances represented one of history's most significant intellectual achievements, laying crucial groundwork for later scientific developments throughout both the Islamic world and eventually Renaissance Europe. As these valuable exchanges of goods and ideas continued expanding, ambitious empires increasingly recognized the strategic and economic importance of controlling these lucrative trade networks. The tremendous wealth flowing through Silk Road trade routes inevitably attracted the attention of powerful empires eager to control or tax this lucrative commerce. Han China maintained military garrisons throughout Central Asian territories, specifically to protect trade routes and ensure continued access to profitable Western markets. The Parthian Empire, controlling territories throughout Persia and Mesopotamia, occupied a crucial strategic position along trade routes connecting China and India to Mediterranean markets, generating enormous wealth through taxation and intermediary trading activities. The Kushan Empire, controlling territories throughout modern Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India, similarly profited enormously from its strategic position, facilitating trade between China, India, Persia, and eventually Rome. Rome itself, despite lacking direct territorial control over Silk Road routes, exercised enormous economic influence through its massive demand for Eastern luxury goods, effectively shaping trade patterns throughout the entire network through pure market forces. These four major powers, controlling different sections of this vast interconnected trade network, sometimes cooperated peacefully, recognizing mutual benefits from continued stable commerce. However, periods of intense political rivalry, territorial disputes, and outright military conflict repeatedly threatened to disrupt trade routes, as competing empires sought greater control over the most profitable sections of these lucrative pathways. Wars between Parthia and Rome, internal conflicts within Han China, and shifting alliances throughout Central Asia created periodic instability that merchants had to navigate carefully, often adjusting routes or timing their journeys around dangerous military campaigns. Despite these political complications, the overwhelming economic incentives ensured that trade routes generally persisted, demonstrating commerce's remarkable resilience even amid significant political turbulence. War threatened prosperity, but profit always found a way. Behind every successful shipment of silk, spices, or precious goods stood ordinary merchants who risked everything, including their lives, pursuing extraordinary profits available through Silk Road commerce. Caravan life demanded extraordinary physical endurance, psychological resilience, and practical knowledge necessary for surviving months-long journeys through hostile environments and unpredictable political circumstances. Successful caravans typically employed experienced guides familiar with specific regional terrain, water sources, and potential dangers, their specialized knowledge proving absolutely essential for survival throughout particularly treacherous sections of the journey. Merchants traveled in organized groups for mutual protection, recognizing that larger caravans provided better defense against bandits who frequently targeted smaller, more vulnerable groups, traveling through remote mountain passes or desert regions. Despite these precautions, bandit attacks remained a constant, terrifying possibility throughout the journey, with merchants sometimes losing entire shipments, pack animals, and occasionally their lives to opportunistic raiders who knew the terrain better than outsiders ever could. Mountain crossings through the Pamir and Tian Shan ranges presented their own unique dangers, with treacherous paths, sudden weather changes, and the constant threat of avalanches testing every traveler's courage and physical capability. Merchants carried specialized equipment suited to their particular route, including warm clothing for mountain passages, specialized water storage for desert crossings, and protective gear designed to safeguard valuable cargo from environmental damage or theft. Financial arrangements for these expeditions often involved complex partnerships between merchants, investors, and caravan operators, with profits and risks carefully calculated and distributed according to prior agreements. Despite extraordinary dangers, merchants continued attempting these journeys generation after generation, drawn by profits substantial enough to justify almost unimaginable risks. The greatest dangers, however, still lay ahead for an entire civilization. In the 13th century, something remarkable happened that transformed Silk Road travel more dramatically than any previous development. Genghis Khan and his successors conquered an unprecedented territory stretching from China to Eastern Europe, creating the largest contiguous land empire in human history. While Mongol conquests initially brought devastating warfare and destruction throughout conquered territories, the resulting unified political control eventually created conditions historians now call the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace. For the first time in centuries, a single political authority controlled vast stretches of the Silk Road simultaneously, eliminating many of the political fragmentation and competing tolls that had previously complicated long-distance trade. Mongol rulers actively encouraged trade and travel throughout their territories, recognizing the enormous economic benefits commerce provided to their expanding empire. They established standardized systems of currency, improved road infrastructure, and provided unprecedented security throughout regions previously plagued by bandits and political instability. Merchants and travelers could now journey across thousands of miles with relative safety, protected by Mongol administrative authority that enforced strict laws against banditry and theft throughout their vast territories. This unprecedented stability dramatically increased trade volume throughout the network, with merchants traveling longer distances, carrying more valuable cargo, and establishing more permanent trading relationships than had previously been possible. European merchants and travelers, previously limited by dangerous political fragmentation throughout Central Asia, suddenly found themselves able to travel safely deep into territories that had remained largely inaccessible for centuries. This remarkable period of stability would soon enable one particular European traveler to undertake a journey that would forever change Western understanding of the East. Travel had never been easier. Among the many travelers who benefited from Mongol-enforced stability throughout Silk Road territories, none would become more famous than a young Venetian merchant named Marco Polo. In 1271, 17-year-old Marco Polo departed Venice alongside his father and uncle, beginning an extraordinary journey that would eventually take him deep into territories controlled by the Mongol Empire, including the magnificent court of Kublai Khan himself. The journey proved extraordinarily difficult, requiring years of travel through diverse terrains, climates, and cultures before finally reaching the Mongol imperial court in China. Marco Polo's accounts, later compiled into a famous book describing his travels, revealed details about Chinese civilization that utterly astonished European readers who had previously possessed only vague, often inaccurate information about distant Eastern societies. He described sophisticated administrative systems, advanced technological innovations including paper currency, and an imperial court of breathtaking wealth and sophistication that seemed almost unbelievable to European audiences accustomed to comparatively modest medieval kingdoms. Marco Polo apparently spent years serving within Kublai Khan's court, undertaking diplomatic missions throughout the vast Mongol Empire, before eventually returning to Venice after 24 years away from his homeland. His detailed accounts, despite some historical debate regarding their complete accuracy, profoundly influenced European understanding of Asia, inspiring later generations of explorers, including Christopher Columbus, who reportedly carried an annotated copy of Marco Polo's book during his own famous voyages centuries later. Marco Polo's remarkable journey demonstrated the genuine connectivity now possible throughout Silk Road territories during this unprecedented period of Mongol-enforced stability. Yet another traveler, from a completely different cultural background, would soon follow an equally remarkable path. While Marco Polo captured European imagination through his famous accounts, another extraordinary traveler from the Islamic world was simultaneously documenting an even more extensive journey throughout territories connected by Silk Road trade networks. Ibn Battuta, born in Morocco in 1304, began what would become nearly 3 decades of continuous travel throughout the Islamic world and beyond, eventually covering distances far exceeding those traveled by Marco Polo. His journeys took him throughout North Africa, the Middle East, Persia, Central Asia, India, China, and Southeast Asia, providing an unprecedented first-hand account of the interconnected civilizations spanning from West Africa to East Asia during this remarkable historical period. Ibn Battuta's detailed observations revealed the sophisticated, interconnected nature of medieval trade networks, describing bustling markets, diverse populations, and remarkable cultural exchange occurring throughout cities connected by these extensive commercial relationships. His accounts demonstrated how thoroughly Islamic civilization had integrated itself throughout Silk Road trade networks, with Muslim merchants, scholars, and travelers establishing significant communities throughout territories stretching from West Africa to China. Both Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta, despite representing vastly different cultural backgrounds and traveling for different purposes, demonstrated something profound about this historical period. The world had become genuinely interconnected through trade, religion, and cultural exchange in ways that previous generations would have found absolutely unimaginable. Yet even as these remarkable travelers documented unprecedented global connectivity, an invisible danger was already spreading silently along these same interconnected pathways, carried unknowingly by merchants, travelers, and the very trade networks that had created such remarkable prosperity and cultural exchange throughout Eurasia. The same interconnected trade networks that had brought unprecedented prosperity and cultural exchange throughout Eurasia would soon facilitate catastrophe on a scale previously unimaginable. Beginning in the 1330s, a devastating disease, likely originating somewhere in Central Asia, began spreading along Silk Road trade routes, carried unknowingly by merchants, travelers, and the very caravans that had connected distant civilizations for centuries. This disease, which historians now call the Black Death, proved catastrophically lethal, killing infected individuals within days through horrifying symptoms that terrified everyone who witnessed its devastating progression. As trade caravans continued their normal commercial activities, they unknowingly carried this deadly disease along established routes, infecting cities throughout Central Asia before eventually reaching Persia, the Middle East, and ultimately Europe by the late 1340s. The resulting pandemic killed an estimated one-third of Europe's entire population, while causing similarly devastating mortality throughout Asia and the Middle East, representing one of history's most catastrophic demographic disasters. The very interconnectedness that had created such remarkable prosperity throughout Silk Road trade networks now facilitated unprecedented suffering and death throughout the same connected civilizations. Trade temporarily collapsed throughout affected regions as terrified populations avoided contact with travelers and merchants who might be carrying this invisible killer. Economic systems throughout Eurasia experienced severe disruption, with labor shortages, social upheaval, and profound psychological trauma affecting societies throughout the connected trade network. This devastating pandemic demonstrated both the remarkable achievement of Silk Road connectivity and its potentially catastrophic consequences when disease, rather than beneficial trade goods, traveled along these same interconnected pathways. The Silk Road and the world it had created would never be quite the same again. In the centuries following the devastating impact of the Black Death, the Silk Road gradually experienced a slow but unmistakable decline that would eventually transform global trade patterns forever. The Mongol Empire, which had provided crucial political stability, enabling unprecedented trade throughout the 13th and early 14th centuries, gradually fragmented into smaller, increasingly unstable successor states throughout the late 14th and 15th centuries. This political fragmentation reintroduced many of the security challenges and competing tolls that had previously complicated long-distance overland trade, making the already dangerous Silk Road journey increasingly expensive and risky for merchants. Various regional conflicts throughout Central Asia further disrupted established trade patterns as competing powers fought for control over increasingly valuable but increasingly contested trade routes. Meanwhile, European merchants and explorers, partly motivated by the disruption and increased costs associated with traditional overland routes, began seriously exploring alternative methods for accessing valuable Eastern markets. Portuguese explorers, in particular, began investigating potential maritime routes around Africa that might provide direct access to Indian and Chinese markets without requiring dangerous, expensive overland journeys through politically unstable Central Asian territories. These early exploratory voyages, while initially uncertain and dangerous in their own right, represented the beginning of a fundamental shift in how international trade would eventually be conducted throughout the coming centuries. Fewer caravans attempted the traditional overland routes as alternative options gradually became available, while the merchants who continued traditional trade increasingly faced declining profits due to mounting political instability and competing maritime alternatives. A new route was about to dramatically change everything about how global trade actually functioned. The eventual triumph of maritime trade routes represented one of history's most significant transformations in global commerce, fundamentally altering patterns that had persisted for over 1,000 years throughout Silk Road territories. Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama successfully navigated around Africa's southern tip and reached India directly by sea in 1498, demonstrating conclusively that maritime routes could provide viable alternatives to traditional overland Silk Road journeys. This breakthrough proved enormously significant, as ships could transport substantially larger cargo quantities more efficiently than traditional camel caravans, while avoiding many of the political complications, security risks, and expensive tolls associated with overland routes through numerous competing territories. European maritime powers, including Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, and eventually England, rapidly developed extensive trading networks throughout Asia, gradually establishing direct commercial relationships that bypassed traditional overland intermediaries entirely. These maritime trade routes proved remarkably efficient, enabling unprecedented quantities of goods to move between Europe and Asia, while generating enormous profits for European trading companies that increasingly dominated international commerce. Traditional Silk Road merchants and the cities that had depended upon overland trade increasingly found themselves economically marginalized as global commerce patterns shifted decisively toward maritime alternatives. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, once thriving centers of international trade, experienced gradual economic decline as merchant caravans became less frequent and less profitable compared to previous centuries. This dramatic shift toward maritime commerce represented not merely a change in transportation methods, but a fundamental restructuring of global economic relationships that had previously depended heavily upon traditional Silk Road networks. The ancient overland road that had connected civilizations for over 1,000 years was beginning to fade into historical memory. By the 17th and 18th centuries, traditional overland Silk Road commerce had diminished dramatically, reduced to a small fraction of its former extensive activity throughout previous centuries. The magnificent caravanserais that had once provided essential shelter and security for thousands of
These
merchants
calculations are
now
remarkable.
stood
They
increasingly
align with the
empty.
celestial
Their
movements.
elaborate
This map shows a
architecture
vast
serving
new
as
world.
melancholy
It will change
reminders
our
of previous
understanding.
prosperity
We must share this
rather than
knowledge.
bustling centers of international commerce. Cities throughout Central Asia that had flourished specifically because of their strategic positions along traditional trade routes experienced significant economic challenges as their traditional commercial advantages disappeared. Some former Silk Road cities successfully adapted to changing economic circumstances, developing alternative economic activities, or finding new roles within evolving regional trade networks. Others experienced more significant decline, their populations gradually decreasing as economic opportunities diminished alongside reduced traditional trade activity. The skilled craftsmen, experienced guides, and specialized merchants who had previously depended upon Silk Road commerce increasingly sought alternative livelihoods as traditional trading opportunities became increasingly scarce throughout the region. Despite this significant decline, some limited overland trade continued throughout subsequent centuries, demonstrating remarkable persistence even as the route's overall historical significance diminished considerably compared to previous centuries. Local and regional trade continued connecting nearby communities, even as the grand international commerce that had once defined the Silk Road's historical importance largely disappeared. The ancient road that had connected civilizations
These new
for
maps
over
show routes
1,000
beyond the
years
known
had
lands.
effectively
Indeed,
ended
knowledge flows
as
like
a
the trade
major
winds,
global
and these
trade
books
route.
will guide us.
Yet
This
even
spice
as the
route promises
physical
great wealth.
caravans
Let us
disappeared
secure the
from
eastern
history,
path. Wise plan.
the profound civilizational influence created through centuries of cultural, religious, and intellectual exchange refused to simply vanish from human memory and continued historical significance. Looking back across the extraordinary history of the Silk Road, historians increasingly recognize its profound, lasting impact, extending far beyond simple commercial transactions involving silk, spices, and other valuable trade goods. The religious traditions that spread along these ancient trade routes, including Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, continue shaping the spiritual lives of billions of people throughout the world today, representing perhaps the most significant and enduring legacy of this remarkable historical network. Scientific and technological innovations that traveled along Silk Road pathways, including papermaking, mathematical concepts, and various technological innovations, fundamentally influenced human civilization's subsequent development throughout both Asia and Europe. Cultural exchange facilitated through centuries of Silk Road commerce created lasting artistic, culinary, and linguistic influences that continue manifesting themselves throughout contemporary societies, stretching from East Asia to Western Europe. The basic concept underlying the Silk Road, connecting distant civilizations through mutually beneficial trade and cultural exchange, established fundamental principles that continue influencing how contemporary global trade and international relations actually function. Modern international commerce, despite utilizing dramatically different transportation methods and communication technologies, continues operating according to principles first established along ancient Silk Road trade networks centuries earlier. The historical pattern of civilizations benefiting from increased connectivity, cultural exchange, and economic cooperation established crucial precedents.
These new
that
maps show
continue
routes beyond the known
influencing
lands.
contemporary
Indeed,
approaches
knowledge
to
flows like the trade
international
winds,
trade,
and these books will guide us.
diplomacy, and
This spice
cultural
route promises
exchange
great
throughout our
wealth. Let us
genuinely
secure the Eastern Pass.
interconnected
Wise plan.
modern world. The Silk Road's remarkable story, while historically concluded as an active overland trade route centuries ago, continues profoundly influencing contemporary global civilization in ways most people rarely recognize or fully appreciate. Its remarkable story, in many genuine respects, continues unfolding even today. The caravans are gone now, vanished into history, alongside the merchants who once risked everything crossing impossible deserts and treacherous mountain passes in pursuit of extraordinary profits. The empires that once fought desperately for control over these lucrative trade routes have fallen. Their palaces crumbled into archaeological ruins, studied by historians seeking to understand civilizations long since vanished from the earth. Desert winds have gradually buried many of the ancient pathways that once connected Chang'an to Rome, erasing physical evidence of routes that once carried humanity's most precious cargo across thousands of miles of hostile terrain. Yet despite this physical disappearance, the profound legacy created through centuries of Silk Road commerce and cultural exchange continues echoing powerfully
中卿驾，
throughout the
此
contemporary
图可是我
world
方略。
in
陛下，
countless
至路乃
ways
南下婴
most
偶，一
people
速取之
never。
善
consciously recognize.
粮草辎重，可曾备妥？
Every international
回禀陛下，
shipment
已抽集
crossing
3月
oceans
之用。
today, every exchange of scientific knowledge between distant countries, every spiritual tradition practiced by billions of people worldwide, and every connection forged between previously isolated cultures ultimately traces conceptual roots back to this extraordinary historical network that began connecting humanity together thousands of years ago.
The Silk Road
Silk
brings
Road,
us prosperity.
despite its eventual
Indeed,
historical
what treasures do you bring?
conclusion as an
Silks
active
and spices
overland
from the
trading route,
east. We have
fundamentally
Roman
established
glass to trade.
principles of global
These silks
interconnection
are
that
exquisite.
continue
What is your
shaping
offer?
contemporary
50 gold coins and this map of
civilization in
trade
ways
routes,
both
and
obvious
safe passage
and
through our
subtle.
lands.
A
It was
fair
never merely
proposal.
a
We
physical
have an
road
agreement.
connecting distant cities
These
through
calculations
dangerous
are
overland
remarkable.
passages.
They align with the
It
celestial
represented
movements.
humanity's
This
first
map shows a
genuine
vast
attempt
new
at
world.
creating a
It will
truly
change our
interconnected,
understanding.
globally
We must share
aware
this knowledge.
civilization.
These new
The
maps
Silk
show
Road
routes
was
beyond the known
original
lands.
path that
Indeed,
ultimately
knowledge flows
brought
like the
our
trade winds,
entire
and these books will
interconnected
guide
world
us.
together,
This spice route promises great
establishing
wealth.
patterns of
Let us
exchange,
secure the Eastern Pass. Wise
communication,
plan.
and mutual
This map
influence
shows the
that
path to the
continue
Eastern
defining
kingdoms.
human
Indeed,
civilization
our
even
Arabic
now,
texts confirm
thousands
it.
of
The
years
globe
after
shows
those
the
first
distances are
caravans
vast.
began
Trade
their
will bridge these
extraordinary
worlds
journey.
and spread